This is The Wilderness and the Wellspring, the podcast companion to the newsletter of the same name, about the difficult times when you want to give up on your creative pursuits and the beauty of the act of creation. I'm your host, Jeff Lunt. This is episode 8, an interview with Hunter Gerkin, the music composer on a video game I'm working on called Soul of Argus. Hey there, podcast listeners. If you like what you're hearing and you'd like to see the show reach a broader audience, there's a couple of things you could do that would really be helpful. The first is to share the show with someone you think would find it interesting. And the other thing you could do is consider taking a few moments out of your day and leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you decide to take time out of your day to do either of those things, I just wanted to say thank you for listening, and I really appreciate it. And now, on with the show. Hello, everybody. This is Jeff. I'm working on a game called Soul of Argus, as you probably know. You've seen this channel many times. It's a techno surveillance MMO, as I call it. A game about data, identity, and security in the modern world. And I've been working with a composer, Hunter Gerkin, who I have here with me, to do some of the music for the game. Hunter, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing quite well. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Thanks for agreeing to do this, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So we got connected on this project in the spring of this year, right? 2022. So I'm curious, is that about right? Something like that.
Yeah, I think spring or early summer.
So I've been working on this game in my spare time for a couple of years. And earlier this year, I reached out to Hunter to do some music for the game. And Hunter, I'm wondering if you could start by telling us a little bit about your compositional background and some of the other projects you've worked on.
Okay. I started composing consistently, I think, in around junior year of high school. I took a music composition class because I was in an art school. So that helped me just get super interested. I did a little bit before that, but I didn't really know what I was doing until I took that class. And then from there, I just loved it. I loved it even more than playing the piano, which I had been doing for I don't know, 8, 9 years at that point, and now it's almost 15 that I've been playing piano. So that's my background. As for other projects I've worked on, I have, on my spare time, been working on making games with my friends. And I'm the composer for that. I write all the songs. So I have a few of those just stored away somewhere, and they'll be in that game whenever that comes out. It's an ongoing process.
It always is.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've done small things here and there for people. I've had small requests to make, for instance, I had a request to help someone write a song that they wrote the lyrics for when they were younger. They never actually managed to figure out how to write the song part of it, so they wanted my help, and they had the lyrics and everything. So I just wrote the song around the lyrics, and we worked together, and they sang it, and then that's what we did.
Do you collaborate with people more in person a lot? Do you write a lot of things? Is it more of a kind of a solo experience where you bring things back to a group, or what's that like for you?
I think I've done more collaborations in person than I have done solo stuff, but I kind of like doing the solo stuff more sometimes. It's a give and take, right? When you're doing stuff in person, you can get a lot more feedback, especially if they're the like leader, if it's not a collaboration, like you're both on equal footing, if it's like, hey, I want you to do this for me, then they can give you feedback immediately. You write something and they go, I don't like that so much. Or they go, wow, that's amazing. Let's have more of that sort of thing. And so you know immediately what they want. Um, and it's also really good for if they're actually in the song. Like, for instance, that person, like I said, they sang the lyrics, they were uh, the songstress. So having them there for that makes it a lot easier than having to like, here, I'm going to send you this, and then you send me yours back, and then I put it in, and then I send you another one, and it's just all kinds of whack. But as the solo experience, you have a lot more control, even if there are ideas or specific scenarios presented to you. You just send in, you make a whole uh, product, basically a whole song's worth of stuff, or at least enough that you feel like you're ready to send it. And then once you send the whole thing, you get the feedback as opposed to individual parts, which maybe an individual part doesn't sound right until you have uh, the entire rest of the surrounding pieces, you know?
Mhm.
So that can certainly be helpful. And again, just having control is nice to not have to worry about um, this or that. Like especially if it's not with someone else directing you, just by yourself. Like I said, like basically, like instead of doing a collaboration project, um, working on your own, basically just with your own footing and having your own choices to make is a completely different process.
When you say sometimes you prefer the solo stuff, is it, do you feel because it's a greater kind of creative space, or maybe it's on your own time and schedule, or tell me a little bit more about that?
A little bit of both, I would say. Having your own time and schedule is very, very nice to just be like, okay, I need to work on this today, and I can work on it at my own leisure, my own pace until I'm satisfied with it, as opposed to feeling the pressure of someone right next to you, like they're not doing anything while I'm working on this, or I feel bad just um, with this or that while you're trying to make the perfect notes, the perfect section or whatever. Um, it can be, or the other way around. You want them to keep redoing their own part over and over and over again until they get it the way you want it to be, and it's just like, or the way that they want it to be, and it's just like you kind of just sitting there, you know, and it can be sort of um like you're not helping the amount that you want to be, and it can be a sort of pressure that does not exist in the solo environment. Um, and also, like, um, what was the first part again? I said that was for the second part. That was for the timing. What was the first thing?
The sort of comparison between the solo experience, the creative space, or the difference in how that might feel
Right.
solo versus in a group or on someone
Yeah,
else's
yeah,
schedule. Yeah.
yeah. The creative experience is definitely very different as well. When you don't have to worry about someone else's input, it feels like it's good to have other people's input too, for sure. But I think I prefer to go solo because I just like I often know something that I want like immediately. I have an idea in my head and I just need to figure out how to put it down on paper. And sometimes it doesn't sound good until there's the surrounding stuff, like I mentioned earlier. So, um, or I need to find the right instrument or whatever. And if I feel pressured to just do it quickly because someone is with me and I just want to move it along, then it's like it might not be exactly what I wanted, and that can be frustrating um, as a sort of compromise or an in between.
Mm. You'd mentioned we were talking earlier about um, Soul of Argus being kind of this. It's more open-ended world and it's less linear compared to some of the other projects you worked on. Like, tell me a little bit about what it's like to make music for something where you have a lot of information, whereas I, maybe you would use a different word, but like I would describe our experience as more like, hey, here's some general things I'm going for. um, throw something back in my direction and let's kind of talk about it and see where we go.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a that that's a pretty good description. It's like you give me general concepts and ideas, and then from there I'm to sort of roam free. I think that it's a very unique experience um, compared to having more direct things, because I think that's how most of the time it tends to go. It's like, hey, here's this specific character. Here's what they're like. Here's what they do. Write me a theme for their that fits them and their story arc and everything. And that's not really how we do it. And so having this experience for the first time is like it allows you to be more um what's the word I'm looking for? It's like I have ideas already in my head of just the stories and concepts and electronic ideas, because that's the kind of music that I like, and that's the sort of music that I'm making for the game. And so when you give me those ideas, I can sort of just mesh something from my own brain in with the general concepts that are given to me, and then create something from there, as opposed to basically to a T following instructions more closely with a more direct approach. And neither's bad. It's not like one is good and one is bad, or one's better than the other. They're both just different. Um, I don't want to give a bad impression, like, oh, you should do it this way or that way. That's not what it's about. It's just a different, unique experience.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, part of I think the part of the approach from my side is I don't have any musical background. I sort of I have a much simpler relationship with it. You know, I hear something and I like it or I don't like it or I have a question or something like that. But it's interesting because I've talked to some other people about the experience of working with you, and one of the questions that kind of comes up is, well, how do I give information or feedback or direction? And the honest truth is, like, it's really hard for me to be directive about this. There was one song on the soundtrack in particular where I'd given some feedback and asked for something specific, but I wound up just feeling like the the best stuff you were producing was the stuff that you were free to explore kind of on your own. And I could see my influence on that one particular track in a very basic way. I mean, when I say influence, I don't mean like deep creative influence. I mean like, hey, could you slow the tempo down, or could you adjust the instrumentation in this way, or whatever, like tweaks, really. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. When I was trying to think about who I wanted to work with, or like how to go about doing the soundtrack, first of all, I knew I couldn't do it. And even hypothetically, if I wanted to spend years and years trying to learn some skill around it, I just feel like I would never really be satisfied with it. Like my main skill is programming, and I'm really good at that. But I didn't want to go down that road of trying to piece it together. I didn't want to, as like, this is a hobby indie thing for me on the side as well. So I didn't want to piece it together with stock music. I thought, it would be really great to have something unique, something specifically created for the game. And so I thought, well, I think what I need is someone who's really strong musically in the same way that I'm strong in programming, and that we just talk about the themes. And I was hoping that would work. And I would say from my side, it definitely has. It's been great working with you. Like, I can give you an idea, and the fact that you do electronic and synth music and I'm doing a game about technology seems to match really well. That was just a nice coincidence. But I'm curious, what do you ever feel like the creative freedom's nice, but is it too much? I
I
don't know.
I wouldn't say it's too much, but I definitely get worried sometimes. Like, what am I gonna do when a specific character or something. Like is one of my themes, once I see the game in its entirety, it's finished. If one of my themes, say, gets like placed on a character, once I see their arc and like what they go through and everything, am I going to wish that I had that information so maybe I could write
Mm,
something
mm.
more specific to them? I've thought about that a few times, but I'm not too worried about it. If you're the game director and you're happy with what I'm producing, then I'm happy with it too. It's not like my, if it was like my game, I think I would be more um prone to want to know that sorts of stuff. But I'm, as the just the composer, I'm going to trust your judgment on whether something fits or doesn't, if something needs to be tweaked and all that, for the most part.
Well, I guess we'll see if you tell me to remove your name from the game because you're so embarrassed by what I build. But
I don't think that'll happen. I'm pretty proud of a few of these songs. I'm actually listening to them right now. That's my background music for this
oh, nice.
podcast.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it so far as well. And you mentioned something earlier about how some pieces or some themes, when they're early in the work, they kind of stand on their own, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not sure where this fits in. I think that's especially been the case with Soul of Argus because the first couple of tracks is like, okay, we're talking general themes. Hunter's giving me something back. I'm listening. Okay, I like what I'm hearing, but I'm also in my own head kind of piecing it together a little bit. Like for example, I don't remember exactly what I said, but there was an email where I was like, I have this idea for a concept of this community, and here are some of their beliefs and their values and the things they care about and think about. And you'd sent me this track back that I thought fit really well.
Yeah.
Where am I trying to go with this exactly?
I'm not sure, but I would say that that's the more directive type approach. You pretty much gave me, this is their story, this is what they do. You didn't go into super specifics, but it was still way more specific than the themes before, and I was able to create something I think more directed at that specific group and that specific idea.
I That's the way I felt too. And then it was interesting because I wanted to explore kind of a broader landscape, but didn't have anywhere in particular to go. Yeah, so I was talking about how a particular piece of music fits in with the game and the mood and the kind of the stage, the audio stage you're setting. And I remember having the experience early in our collaboration where I was liking what I was hearing, but I didn't know if as it grew it was going to kind of all mesh together. And I remember it was probably around like the fourth or fifth track you sent me, I started to hear echoes of themes and instrumentation. It started to click, like I, again, like not having a musical background, I was just kind of receiving this raw audio in a sense. And it was really cool as more tracks came together to sort of notice that it was fitting together thematically. At least for me, it felt like, oh yeah, all this music collectively goes together. And that was like a really cool, fun surprise.
That's really cool. I'm glad that you felt that way. I definitely try, like to some degree, to put it together. I don't use the there's a technique where basically like you use the same notes and like put it into different songs, or if it's not the same notes, then the same intervals in between the notes, so it sounds like the same theme, and then you put that in. I haven't really used too much of that, but I have definitely, with the instrumentation, tried to keep things cohesive in a way that flows together.
Yeah, and so far so good. I think I can't remember if we definitely decide. So we definitely decided at the beginning to say do around 40 to 45 minutes of music. We had chatted about maybe doing more. I think we're still quite a ways from the original sort of box or whatever. But yeah, as more stuff keeps coming out, every time I get an email from you that has a track attached, I'm just like, oh, it like makes my day. I'm just like, yes. And I go listen to it
Nice.
like two or three times immediately. And then I sit on it for 24 hours at least and then like listen again. And I'll listen to it on like really nice speakers and then just like my laptop speakers and kind of like get a feel for it in different settings. I'll go for a walk while listening to it. And Yeah, I just love the whole vibe of that and kind of soaking it in. I suppose because it's, this is the game I'm working on. There's this like weird, like I want to love everything. It's not quite like I want to be in control of everything. It's like I get to experience the game unfolding in its various parts,
Mhm.
which is fun. To be working with somebody else on it is even more rewarding for me because
No.
it's uh it's like an interplay. There's like this creative input that wouldn't be there if it was just me, that I think is really fun.
Yeah, you just want there to be you want the game to be the best that it can be. And so when you see the parts coming together in ways that are what you thought it would be, it it's like endorphin release.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm glad you've liked listening to them all. You know how it is as an artist. You do things and you send things and sometimes you're like, "Man, I hate this." I said there's one, I think is only one song so far, but I listened back to it and I'm like, man.
every time I sit down to write code for the game, that's the first thing I play the whole soundtrack to myself, what we have so far, and then I'll play some other stuff that I was listening to before I started working with you, like the soundtrack to Blade Runner, the 1980s Blade Runner or Tron or stuff like that. Some stuff that kind of would inspire my love of this concept, the whole game concept. And I'll tell you, my least favorite track so far is actually the one I had the most input in. And I was talking to somebody about it. I was like,
Hmm.
I think that's a sign that maybe I should step back and let Hunter do more of his thing. Because my favorite stuff is the stuff you do pretty much entirely on your own with maybe one or two questions from me. And I was like, yeah, I, I think I'm just going to play my role as the programmer and theme person and then just try to stand back and enjoy it as much as possible.
Nice. I'm glad that I've been able to do so well for you, and that's funny. I liked the song better after your input, actually. So that's interesting. My least favorite song is actually pretty recent. It was just defining the boundary. I didn't man. It's all right. It's not bad. I don't know. I feel like I could have done better.
We're going to take a quick break from the conversation, and I'm going to play you the first 30 seconds or so of the song that Hunter's referring to that he feels like, he could do better. Um, this song is called Defining the Boundary, and it is going to make it onto the game's soundtrack. Fair warning, the song starts out full volume right at the top. So if you need to adjust your headphones or anything to maybe turn it down so you're not shocked by it, go ahead and do so now. And then later in the podcast, I'm going to play the song that both of us actually like the most from the soundtrack so far. So here we go. First little bit of Defining the Boundary. So there you go, just a little taste of what's coming in the soundtrack. And now I will jump right back into the middle of the conversation that Hunter and I were already having. I get that too. It's so easy to be self-critical, um, Because I mean, on the receiving end, um, if I like what I like, it's like I don't think much more deeply than that, honestly. Um, for a lot of this stuff, I just sort of just try to experience it as it is. But I totally get there's a gap sometimes when you have an idea and then you get down to the point where you're like, well, this is as done as this thing's ever going to be, or this is as good as I can do for now, or whatever. And there's a gap between what you kind of hoped for and the feeling it gives you. Even if other people like it, it feels strange, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. You pretty much got it spot on.
So you told me a little bit about your musical background. I was wondering if you could tell me, like, if you do you have any strong early memories of music, or like did you kind of come to music at what point in your life, and versus other creative pursuits you might have been interested in before that?
Well, I think I've always been like I've always liked music, and I have like definitely some memories of it. Like I remember when being little and I would there when I was really really little, like before my memory, I don't know, like one or whatever, two. There was I forget what it's called. I think it's called Baby Einstein, and they would have a section where music, just like orchestral music, would play, and I would like direct with my fingers basically.
Oh, cool.
So the ties were there when I was young. I just didn't know. But when I actually had a memory and stuff, I remember singing a lot in the car. I don't really like to sing now, but I just liked the flow of the music, and I think that that definitely stuck with me. I tried some other extracurricular activities prior to music, like sports, but nothing just ever stuck out to me. I just didn't really enjoy anything until I landed on piano.
I'm a very visual person, so like other than programming, my most the other sort of hobby or deep passion I had was photography. And so when I listen to music, I have a like a very internally visual experience with it, and I love how for me these tracks evoke a different kind of environment, but they always bring kind of a similar mood every time I listen, and it's fun to kind of listen to it in different contexts and just see what it adds to my in the moment experience. It's really cool.
That's great. I'm glad that it's able to do that for you. I actually have this thing called aphantasia, so I can't like picture things in my head in the same way that other people can.
Mm.
So it's hard for me to like visualize actual visuals. So I try to latch on to the emotions of a situation or the emotions behind like w- why I'm writing that song. Like for instance, if it's not tied directly to some scene that I'm imagining in the game or like what could be in the game, I'm doing it with something that just is important to me, and then I use the instrumentation that I think will fit the game's themes.
So you mentioned connecting with piano early on. How did that? Tell me about the journey from there to the kind of music you're composing now and the kinds of tools you use, and how does it compare? Is it do you use like a keyboard to do that kind of stuff and just bring a lot of different instruments and sounds in? Is there a lot of overlap to your piano experience, or is it totally different now that you're doing all this digital stuff?
Yeah, okay. So I there okay, so there's different ways you can go about it, right? But the way that I like to do it is um first thing you need is a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, and that is how you create music basically in the modern day and age. If you want to do anything, you need a DAW. And I specifically have one that's for electronic music called Bitwig, and it's basically designed super around using all these synths and being really streamlined and easy to do that sort of thing in. And use MIDI tracks. So that's what I use for that, and that has most of the sounds built in that I'm using. There are a few that I've taken from elsewhere that I bought along the way. For instance, in the most recent tracks, I recently bought Addictive Drums, which is a pack of drums, and they sound way more realistic than the other ones that I've been using that are default in Bitwig. And there's different reasons to use. each one. It's not like the ones in Bitwig are bag. In fact, I'm very, very happy with some of the drum kits. It's kind of crazy. I'm Most of the time drums sound like garbage until you buy some expensive ones like I did. But uh anyway, beyond that tangent, the way that I actually input the music is that I have a MIDI keyboard. So what that is basically you plug it into your computer, and then whenever you press a note, the DAW will read it and play the exact note in the DAW. Otherwise, I would have to go through and click every single note, and it would not be impossible, but it would be annoying. And yeah, so that's the other way that you can go about it. Basically, is clicking, or there are key shortcuts to go about that. But I, I, since I learned piano, I just like to use it, and it's faster for me, makes more sense, and that way it's limited to um more of what I can actually play, which means that it's more human because I'm not like the best pianist in the world, but I like to think that I'm at least somewhat skilled. So that means that a I have a wide range of what I can actually play in the realm of what humans can play, and it will make it sound less robot-y than sometimes if I
Mm.
would have just clicked or had some idea and then just put it in, you know. And there's a difference between electronic and robot-y. I just mean like there's a level where you're like, that's just not quite right. And that's what I mean. You can just feel that it's not got the human touch. And that's the reason why I also like to play and input myself.
So does that mean you're like recording different parts by playing them live, and maybe if you make a mistake, maybe you tweak something or something like that. But like what you're putting in the final output, MP3 or a WAV file, is a collection of those sort of parts performed live. It's a lot closer to that than you just filling out sheet music and telling the computer to do it.
Yeah, yeah, correct. I've played all of the things that I've given to you, other than some of the drum parts. You can input the keyboard and do the drum parts, and I did that for a lot of them. But every once in a while, I have used more of a. They come with sometimes default beats, and then I've just tweaked those slightly. But for the most part, yeah, I'll play something, and unless I get it like super close, I'll delete it and try again. And then once I get it super close or perfect, I'll just go in and tweak the little bits that I need to. But yeah, I only play one part at a time, so one instrument at a time. So I'm not using both hands for different overlaying parts. It's just like if it's the bass part, I play the bass with one hand, go back, record the next thing, whatever lead synth I'm using, go back, do the drums, go back. So yeah.
Gotcha. Is there anything in particular about the synths and the electronic stuff that, because I'm guessing you could compose just about any style of music using a DAW that you wanted. I mean, it's kind of a naive question on
hmm
my part, but is there something specific about this style or this genre that you feel especially connected to?
Yeah, I grew up on a lot of video games when I was younger. That was my main pastime, basically, was playing video games. And especially, I ended up liking a lot of the more retro, older games. And so I found myself listening to more of those chip tuney type songs.
Hmm.
And I landed basically like around the late SNES, early N64 type era of music ended up being my favorite, where it was like mhm, sophisticated enough to sound not like just beeps and boops like a lot of the NES stuff. And you can like it just feels very, very simple, but not so sophisticated that it just sounds like an orchestra like today. You know, it's just like actual orchestral music or
Mm-hmm.
straight up like pop songs or whatever in the games, and that just wasn't viable back then. And I like hearing basically that level of music, and that definitely inspired me because that's like basically the closest to synth stuff. Specifically, there's a composer named Danny Baranowski. He made the music for Super Meat Boy and the original Binding of Isaac and Crypto the Necrodancer. And those types of songs are basically like there's just a lot of inspiration from them. If you listen to his music, you'll definitely hear his influence on me. Um, I love those games, and they are also a part of my childhood.
Yeah, I also remember mentioning Celeste as something I really
Hmm.
liked. I mean, I grew up as well on all that stuff, especially basically from the Atari 2600 through the Nintendo Entertainment System, the first one. That was like the core of my gaming stuff in terms of the formative years. It's really interesting to hear that you're kind of connected to it, even though you're quite a bit younger, I think. So,
I don't think I'm too much younger than you, but yeah, I am. Those are just the games that I ended up liking. I
mhm.
had like just the older systems and emulators and stuff to work off of, and there since emulators you could use games for free. It was like it was definitely useful instead of having to be like, oh, I want my a new GameCube game or a new Wii game or whatever. Those are the systems that were actually out at the time. When I was growing up, it was like, oh, I want these, but then it would cost a bunch of money. So, I'd have to wait until Christmas or my birthday or something. So, and I love those games and those types of music too, but it just, there's something that sort of spoke to me, and those like, we only have so much to work with type of, so we have to make electronic music because we don't really have a choice. That'll always sound electronic,
Hmm.
no matter what we do, like in the SNES and stuff versus when you could choose in the more modern era, like even in the GameCube, there's plenty of uh orchestral sounding stuff like in Wind Waker. There's it just sounds a lot more real, and I like that stuff too, but I just feel this connection to the electronic music.
For me, there's something about putting a constraint on yourself. Like I could do a lot of different things with the game on the programming side in terms of lots of modern features or 3D graphics or whatever. But there's something about wanting to dive into that world and just be there and bring other people with you that I think I really like. I mean, that's a big inspiration of the game itself and the gameplay. Is hey, there's this world that's that digital space that I just want to be in. You want to join me, kind of thing.
I definitely get that. I've always connected a lot with the digital stuff in general. I just feel like there's something about synths that can evoke like emotions that are difficult to convey with real instruments. Like almost like because you're in the digital space, even though it's also limited in its own way, it's also less limiting than the real world because you can only make real sounds in the real world, but you can make
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff in the digital space. And like obviously I know it all comes out in the real world. Like yeah, I know it's like like you can still only hear so much. Like that's how ears work. But
Sure.
it just feels like something special and just super cool.
It's it's when you say that, it almost reminds me of the big switch of people switching from like more text-based communication versus when emojis just exploded and then there were like a million emojis you could choose from. I don't know why it makes me think of that, but it's like there's a whole vocabulary there that people try to describe with natural language, and yet there's this other almost riffing and thing that happens when you change the form of the thing. That's really fun and interesting.
I think that's totally right.
I think I want to do a couple tracks next. Do you have a couple of favorites or ones you think are particularly interesting to talk through? Quick side note, you're going to hear me kind of jumping around in random parts of different tracks. Nothing's wrong with the audio. That's just me kind of orienting myself before Hunter and I dive into a couple of specific tracks.
I really like Contention Tension.
Hmm.
I think that
Mm-hmm.
one is great. And then otherwise, we could do. the first song if you want. The first one I sent was Fim, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we could do the first one. That's the last and first one. So there you go. We can talk about the evolution of the music or whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just kick that off a second. Yeah. Yeah, Contention Tension's my favorite still.
It's
That's
so
so
good.
good. It's so good.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite too. I like Contention Tension and Information Hazard a lot.
Hmm.
Outsider's Perspective is good too.
Mm-hmm. The Outsider's Perspective, that's the one that was the more thematic about the group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I still really want to put that group in the game. I think it'll be interesting. Like place and group of people you could visit, but beyond that, I haven't really fleshed out the idea. But you can't hear what I'm playing, though, can you?
I can if you stream it. Yeah, the little share your screen button. If you have the window up, then you can stream the window and then I can hear it. Yeah,
Thank you
I
for
cannot
teaching me
hear
how to
it.
use Discord.
You're welcome.
You know what? Why am I making this complicated? You can just play it.
That's true. What song do you want me to pull up?
Let's do Fim first, and then
Okay, sounds good.
so okay. So we've been talking about your process and inspiration and stuff. How about we play a couple of the tracks? Do you want to play like the first song that you sent me, and then maybe we'll listen to one of the more recent ones, and just tell me about the song, what you remember about the composition, just some background stuff, and like what you think about the song and how the music is evolving.
Yeah, sure thing. So this first track is called FIM, or Fluctuations and Mechanoid Machinations. It's an acronym.
Okay, so just so you know what to expect here, Hunter's going to start playing the track in the background and talking over it, explaining some of his thought process and the inspiration, and then later we'll play the track just like totally open on its own, so you can hear the whole thing.
Yeah, so basically my thought process wasn't actually like on robots or anything, which is what of course the title is actually about, but I was just thinking in general, this dark, moody, sort of overbearing vibe, which is what I think about a lot when I think of the game. um it's like you're in this technological world where your identity is like always known, or always out there and findable through the internet, or I don't know if it's still called the internet in the game, but that sort of deal. And I wanted to basically capture the fact that, like, hey, you're stuck here. This is the world that you live in, and there's no getting out of it. This is it. This is the world. But that being said, it's not like you can't do anything. It's just like maybe not your favorite, because like that's not the end of the world, right? It's just like, hey, this is a fact,
It's the,
and
yeah,
so
it's the world we live in.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
exactly. It's the world we live in, and you can sort of hear that. It's not like super depressing, like, oh, this is it, I'm done for. It's like it's got some beat to it. Like, this is definitely some beat, right? But it's like it's definitely not just like a fun, happy-go-lucky romp either, right? I definitely would not describe this song as that.
No, definitely not.
This part is like, I really like this. This is a build up, and you're gonna hear it go down in just a second here. Yeah, and then it drops like that. I wanted that big build up, like all this stuff is happening, sort of like a cacophony of electronic noise, and then finally it drops, and it's sort of like I'm imagining like the people, like a group of people, sort of like rising up in like like juxtaposition to all those electronic noises from before. Um, and now it's a lot softer, a lot more like, there can still be change if we want there to be change. And there's stuff that only humans can do. It's not like, hey, this is a electronic overlords, we're slaves or anything. Again, I wanted to make sure that it was like, there is badness here, but that's not all that there is. There's more to it than that. And the reason why I ended up going with the name Fluctuations and Mechanoid Machinations was because I wanted it to be like, things change even within the plans of like whatever's going on, whether that be like literal robots, which I don't think it would be the case in the actual game, or whether it changes in the higher ups in the government or the changes of whatever groups there are out there. Things change, and that is always true no matter what. So you can hear it. Do one last build up here. Then it just fades out. That's the that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about and show off here. It's just kind of it's got lots of stuff going on, but it's also just cool to listen to, which is what I wanted wanted to have happen. I like having again those emotions and those thoughts in there, but if it's not cool or whatever it's supposed to be, sad, if it's supposed to be sad, whatever, then it's like, what's the point? Yeah.
Yeah. So here's FIM uninterrupted. FIMM stands for Fluctuations in Mechanoid Machinations. what you're saying about, the interplay and uh, there's kind of a dark brooding feel to it, but it's not all bad. To me, that represents the players, the NPCs in the world, the struggle that's going on, but it's not all about the struggle. You can also just kind of be in all of that kind of messiness, and there's something pulling
Yeah.
every person, every character through a story or through an experience. The other thing you talked about, the build up, especially at the end, like it gets really intense. And I remember the first time I listened to it, I was like, wow, that's so strong. It's almost like asking for spicy food, and it's like 5 times stronger than you thought it was. And it has this very visceral experience that's awesome about it. And then yeah, it has that fade out tension that I could literally feel myself like relax a little bit. And I love that about that song.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it so much.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites too.
I think it's if I remember, in the current sort of development version of the game, I think it's the song that plays over the title right now, which is great because I love when games have sort of an intro song that, every time you start the game, you're like, oh yeah, pull me back into this world. But I love how if somebody sticks around on the title screen long enough, they get this experience that evolves, and it's not just like a 30-second clip that plays in a loop. There's a whole journey within that song. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
I like to I don't really like to have just like 30 to 45 seconds and then loop it. Yeah, I want there to be a whole song for all of the different moments, because every moment deserves a song, basically. Every theme and whatnot, that you can explore it with more than just like 30 seconds of the same loop over and over, in my opinion. Um Especially again, since we're not actually in the day and age of like the NES or the SNES where you had to like save memory or whatever. We can do whatever we want, basically.
Hmm.
um I like to try and explore everything to a point where I'm satisfied.
Cool, cool.
uh
So, oh, go ahead.
uh I was just gonna say, yeah, so that was the first song that I uh produced and um entered into the game. And so now, um after that, this next song that we're gonna show, I this is the latest song that I've produced and made for the game and had approved and everything. So we're gonna see the evolution and the changes from how I first was writing music up until now, and obviously just like a few months, but a lot can change in that time.
Cool. So, what's the next track? What's the name of this next one? What we're gonna listen to?
Uh, this track is called Contention Tension. You ready for me to play it?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. Yeah. So right off the bat, you can just that vibrating bass in your ears.
Mhm.
It really just puts you immediately into the mood of like, oh, shit's going down, you know. And that's sort of the whole vibe that I wanted to go for here, and thus the name Contention Tension. It's like there's an argument going on here, and it is tense. It is not a super peaceful, like philosophical debate. This is gonna be some stuff is gonna go down at the end of this if some too many words are said one way or the other.
It does feel like, yeah, it's like two people both ready to go into a fight almost. Two forces.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, nobody's, if either person like says one thing wrong, like this is going to spill over.
Yeah. And then of course I gotta add the synthy instrument to fit with the electronic stuff here. And I think that this instrument in particular is sort of like navigating the waters. It's just like, hey, there's, this is what we're talking about, and this is the beginning, before the argument really unfolds. But it's just like the concept, sort of like, you can hear it like, bah, bah, like someone making their points, like they're talking almost, just like, hey, this is the thing that I'm trying to explain to you, and you're not listening. You know, it's got a little bit of tension in there, even though the instrument is, I would say, bright in general. I also like that as the contrast to the underlying, type instrument.
This song is such a great like full spectrum experience too, because especially when I play this on the best speakers that I have, that bass is just I don't even know how to describe it. It's visceral. It pulls you in. It's like this foundation under you, like the ground is shaking. It's probably one of my favorite things about this song.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you like that so much. These harmonies here are like sort of the two, like more people joining in, and then this overlaid one is like the opposite side now going against them. It's the same instrument, but it's like the same bass concept basically, but they're two completely different things now. It's two totally different sides. Just hashing it out. They're trying to basically explain their sides to one another, and the other side just isn't getting it. And then
the flutter.
Yeah. Yeah, that electronic tremolo there is basically just like there's someone cutting in and being like, hey, let's get back on track here. Like it's sort of gone off the rails and too many people are talking, whatever, and so you get back to the chorus.
The tremolo also, I'm trying to think of a good word for it, but there's something about it that you're really into the song at this point. You're about 3 minutes in, and then there's this like very digital, the tremolo, like there's a thing about it. It just like it reminds you that not everything you're seeing is what you think it is.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like almost like a mirage fading.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. And I paused it for a second because I wanted to go back and I want to talk about this next part that's coming up. It was a big part of the song as well when I was writing it. Here we go. So basically, it repeats that little theme again so that it leads you seamlessly. Now there's a new voice in the argument. Something new has come up. A third side. It's a key change. So your brain is like, whoa, this is different now. Things are different, and that's what it's for. It's this new interjection, this new idea. And then you get more people joining in. Perhaps with all these voices, this was the correct solution all along. Who knows? Or perhaps it was implanted by someone else. There's all kinds of stories you can come up with. But basically, now you've got all the different parts are going to come together here. And I'm just going to let this play out some. This in particular, this extra tension with that high one, really wanted to show how tense everything is getting before it all just kind of like fades and wobbles right back to the start. Yeah. So that was that. It plays the chorus one more time and then it's going to cut off because the song is a repeat song, so it'll repeat back from a certain portion. But yeah, I think I said everything I wanted to say about it. Just let the last little bit here play out.
Okay, so now let's listen to Contention Tension, my favorite track on the soundtrack so far. months throughout 2022. Um, we live in different states, so this is all online. In fact, this is probably the most we've ever spoken. Everything's over email and chat and stuff. It's
Yeah, I think
really,
so.
yeah, it's like been a really smooth kind of collaboration from my side. It's like, hey, here's some stuff. Think about this. Send me back an idea, and the stuff you send back is not only great. It's like it's fleshed out, and yeah, you've always got just like a lot to contribute. I think we've laid a lot of the thematic groundwork for the game, and we'll probably explore some more specific stuff in the future. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say we have maybe about half of the music that I think the game will need in terms of like total runtime, and then also covering different aspects of the game, different corners of the game, different feel of the game and stuff. So, how are you feeling about where the soundtrack is right now? And you just showed us the first track that you did and the most recent one. Tell me about that journey so far and like what you're thinking about into the next few months.
I think that the soundtrack is coming along great in general. I love like all the progress that I feel like I've made. While starting off, it's a lot more open ended when I was first starting off, because whatever I made first, then from there that would sort of be the basis um of how it was going to go. So once I made those first like two or three songs, from there it was like, okay, this is the general idea, the general themes that I'm going for, the general instrumentation. So now I need to make that all fit, all the future songs fit within that sort of those sort of guidelines. Um, and I think that I've been doing a pretty good job. Like you said, the most recent song is your favorite, and it's my favorite too. Um, and I hope that it only gets better and better. There's a song that I'm currently working on right now that I think has some potential. I'm struggling a little bit to make it work the way that I that I want, but that happens from time to time. And I'm just excited to keep working on this project. It's really cool to be able to actually be a part of what's going to be like a a full-fledged game, because everything I've worked on before has been like, oh, one or two songs here, one or two songs there, but I'm writing a whole album for this game. And it's going to come together and be cohesive and be something special uh as a whole package.
Yeah, I mean, not only are you doing a great job, I think it's a happy accident that we both have the same favorite song, which I didn't even know before this conversation. I was like, oh, that's great. And yeah, it's there's that creative thing where you're trying to you've got hopes and dreams for what it'll be. You try not to make it infinite in scope because I'll never finish it if
Yeah.
I do that. Um, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to not only how it's gone so far, because you may not realize this, but your music winds up creating a feedback loop that inspires more things in the game, which is interesting. So that's another thing I love about working with somebody else that's like I said earlier, like adds creative energy to the mix, and it's like a greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I love doing this sort of fully fleshed out thing as well. And when I knew I wanted to find somebody that could do the soundtrack, I was hoping to find somebody that wanted to do that too, and had the time and the space and motivation to pull it off. So yeah, so far it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great on my end too. Working with you has pretty much been a breeze. And like you've just been like, all right, here's the ideas I want you to work on. Go for it. I work on it. I send it in, and then you either say yes or no, and then we go from there. It's been super simple. There hasn't been any huge hiccups, and in you're totally free to give your input, and when you have, um, I'm just gone and done it real quick. Like you mentioned earlier, I even though you said that's one of your least favorite songs, I still pretty much just listened to your input right away and put it in and sent it back, and you're happy with it. So I'm glad.
Yeah, well, and to clarify, it's not. Yeah, your turnaround time stuff has been awesome. It's. I think part of why I feel that way about that song is because almost I feel like I've tainted the song actually, and it's like the self criticalness about myself. I was like, ah, man, could this song have been better if I had not put a touch on it? Because yeah, like you're super responsive to feedback and requests for iterations, but that's more what I mean. Is like it's a great song. It's just that like somehow having stirred that pot a little bit, I feel like somehow I tainted it. That's how it feels in my mind. Yeah. As a whole, I'm looking forward to when in the future, we release the whole soundtrack along with the game and people can experience it, the soundtrack as its own thing in addition to the game experience, because like you said, you're writing a whole album, a whole score. And I think what's going to be great about that is like some of those other games that we've talked about where they have a great soundtrack that we like, Celeste being one of them, or some of the SNES games. There's just something about when something works really well, um, it's not just one cohesive experience. Slices of the experience, like the music on its own, can be its own full experience.
Mhm.
And like I said, when I sit down to write the code, the first thing I do to get myself in the mindset and get the motivation going even more is I listen to the soundtrack. So I've probably heard the whole thing of what we have right now, I don't know, 20 or 30 times at least. And I can't get enough of it. And I don't think it's just because like this is the game I'm working on. It's really good. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. Awesome. I agree. I like to think that the soundtrack is good and stands on its own. It's not just uh complimentary to the game, though it definitely is. Um it's more than that, and I hope it can be like I did in the during the section where we played the songs. I basically had my own story that went along with contention tension that you didn't make yourself. I pretty much made it, and then I just made it work within the context of the game, um to the best of my ability.
Well, Hunter, thanks for taking the time to talk to me about this. It's super cool to, even though we've been working together for months over email and talking about this stuff, it's really cool to just take some time to step aside and talk more deeply about your process and how the whole soundtrack part of the game is coming together. So thank you so much for being here. And oh, hey, do you have anything you want to plug? You have like SoundCloud or anything like that?
Not at the moment. I've been waiting for basically this is the first big project that I'm doing. I have some singles that I should probably release somewhere, but I've I'm kind of wanting to make this my big debut because I think it would be super cool. So once this is done, then I will have stuff to plug.
Cool, cool. Well, when of course that happens, we'll link to all that stuff. So hey, well, it's been awesome working with you so far, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be great. So thanks again for everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you too.
So that's been my interview with Hunter Gerkin, the composer that's working on Sola Vargas. It's been a real pleasure, doing indie game development. It's like a passion thing. I mean, I've got a regular day job like a lot of other people doing indie game development, but it's just so great when two creative people come together and it feels kind of effortless and also, like I said, like a greater than the sum of of its parts kind of thing, where the two energies kind of combine. And my hope is, of course, that the game will be better for it. I got to be honest, I feel some pressure. I'm so pleased and impressed with what Hunter's done that like now I feel like I have to step up my game to deliver an actual good game because you know worst case people will be like game's okay, soundtrack's great, So I think Hunter's in a good position here. And so we'll just play out here. I'll put some of the music over the end. And any comments or feedback, let me know. Check out Hunter's stuff online. And thanks for joining. So there's my interview with Hunter Gerkin, the composer working on Soul of Argus. Now, at some point, I have to get back to work and get the game out there. Huh? It's already been 7 months, I think, since Hunter and I recorded that interview. He's done a couple of other things for me that are not related to Soul of Argus for other project. And of course, he's done the intro music for this podcast. And so as we have time and as I have availability, we continue to do little things here and there. Soul of Argus is one of those huge games that's just takes a really long time to build, and it's probably overly ambitious. I think I probably need to dial it back a little bit and ship something sooner than later, but it's just been an absolute dream working with Hunter. So here I'm going to put part of another track from the soundtrack. This is part of a song called Information Hazard. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.